Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, and I'm going to be reading from the book called Sacred Science, a continuation of chorography and the chronological of Egypt by Rene de Lubicz. I didn't finish this particular chapter that I'm going through and the other night, and I wanted to get back into it. And so we're going to try to finish that tonight. I think there's going to be some things I'll share with this within this book also tonight. Appreciate you being here. Um, so thank you. Let's get into the reading of this particular book. As a curiosity, we cite a extraordinary and little known use of quartzite, LZITE, in the infrastructure of two 13th dynasty pyramids, a dynasty about which almost nothing is known. In a pyramid of unified bricks, sorry, in a pyramid of unfired bricks dressed with limestone erected in the name of K.H. Kenzer, Khenzer, User, USER, Ka, Ra. The burial chambers made of a monolith of very fine grain and extremely hard quartz-like weighted about weighs about 60 tons, hollowed out in such a way as to leave a place in the bottom for the sarcophagus and the chests of canonic jars. In the other pyramid, which is anonymous, the funeral chamber, that is, first covered with limestone and in two places with granite, containing a quartzite monolith of about 150 tons, carved in the shape of a trough. This enormous block, like the aforementioned, was worked so that the sarcophagus and the chests of the canonic jars projected from the mass of stone. Three enormous blocks of quartzite formed the roof. This is a section called number 3. The third kind of stone that plays an important role in construction is white limestone. This sedimentary rock contains numerous layers of flint notures and horizontal deposit, the whole overlay with beds of sandstone along both banks of the Nile from Esna, Esena, to Cairo. It was from these high cliffs that the ancients excavated the pure limestone for the royal tombs of Thebes. For example, working the flint notures as easily as the soft limestone, the fact that extant monuments show no flint notures broken away from their cavity reveals the existence of tools capable of easily slicing through them, and consequently of a surprising technique and method. The limestone is called the white stone, and that of Turut, that is near Cairo, was particularly renowned under the name of white stone of Aeon, designed to the writings by an eye underlined with a stroke of coal. This is the material utilized for the splendid, newly discovered stepping stone walls surrounding the pyramids of Zora. That's Zoser, and Sakim Klep, which date from the third dynasty. It is also very likely that this same limestone of Aeon was used in the construction of white walls to name the city of Memphis, where the Temple of Plate was located. Most people, it's kind of interesting as he was pointing out, Rene points out, very few people really actually go to all the pyramids in Egypt. Many of them, there are many of them there, and basically you would have to spend probably a month or two to even see them all, and a lot of them are actually not even. That is, a lot of them are not even visited. You see, And it's kind of interesting that a lot of the tourists come in and go to certain areas and then they're gone. Anyway, like I said, this guy spent 15 years in Egypt looking at all this stuff. So anyway, in the prehistoric period, limestone was employed to make pear-shaped mesas, the image of which is used to designate the color white. What he calls Hedj, Hedj, in the hieroglyphic writings. White limestone was also selected for the monument to the Sed festival of Sosoritrius, the first at Karnak, 12th dynasty. And this fact prompts his comparison with a certain mesa white limestone belonging to King Narmer, Narmer, and repeating the first known ceremony of the Set festival dating back to the first dynasty. So I'm going to show you a picture of this real quick. Okay, it's right here at the upper part. Right up there. Let's see where we're at. Okay, in the construction, limestone symbolizes what we call air, as it were, veget matter. Among the buildings of the ancient empire, mention must be made of the descending passageway connecting the pyramid of Unas, situated on the plateau with its temple in the valley. This passageway is 666 meters long and 6 meters and 70 wide, was entirely paved, and its adjoining limestone walls were covered with magnificent bas reliefs representing all manner of religious, I should say, of craft working and agricultural scenes. It should be remembered that it was in the pyramid of Unas that the religion text, that is the religious text concerning afterlife, known as the pyramid texts, were first discovered. Carved in the walls of interior chambers, the burial chamber is lined with limestone on only 3 of its walls. The west wall and the ends of the north and south walls encasing the basalt sarcophagus being made of alabaster. The hearses blocking the corridor are of red granite. Alabaster probably originated from limestone in a liquid or muddy state, whence come its gray, brown, or rosy pores flowing in its light veils, as if this matter were in the state of becoming from a more terrestrial state towards a more subtle flowing state that could be compared to cream rising to the top of milk. We would say, some of us would say with cream, but also the fat. It is curious in this connection to note that Anchor, A-N-K-H, Yas, UAS, the sap of life, is one of the designations of milk, and that ANKH, meaning life, sometimes also serves to designate alabaster or some object executed in this material. But the term must be specifically designed, that is designated. Alabaster is chess, C-H-E-S, a phonetic group which, depending on the determinate, can also mean a edible grain or something precious. Alabaster is frequently qualified as clear or pure, followed by the name of its place of origin, the most famous being Hat-Nan, that's H-A-T-N-U-B. Hat-Nan, House of Gold, is the name of an important alabaster deposit in the Arabian Mountains, located about 20 kilometers southeast of Tel Amaralnun. Since the 4th dynasty, the Egyptians went there to seek the beautiful translucent alabaster necessary for their monuments. It's important to note that this appellation of House of Gold for alabaster quarry, as gold is never found in limestone mines. This is evident a allusion to a phase of the Hermetic opus, and is not without interest to remark that the term Hat-Nam, chamber of castle of gold, serves to designate the funeral or sarcophagus chamber in the tombs, or the workshops where the temple statues of the Neters were carved and decorated with precious metals, or the spot where statues of Osiris were placed in the serapeum of the most important temples, and where several ceremonies of the Neter resurrection took place during the month of Khoiah, which is during the Christmas time. Among the famous monumental masterpiece in alabaster is the Sanctuary of Thothmes, Thothmes III, at Karnak, designated to house the sacred boat of Ammon. Each of its walls is made from a single piece of alabaster 8 meters in length. Section 4. Unbaked brick made out of Nile mud, which is very rich in vegetable matter, and the construction it symbolizes water. Texts of the foundation ritual called it marriage of earth and water. When the symbolism on is demanded, there was no hesitation in building with hard stones upon foundations of unfired bricks. The surrounding walls of the courtyard of Nectar Tabot at Luxor, for example, is made of unbaked bricks curved inward so as to form archways in both floor plan and elevation. The northwest angle of this wall is worked in stone resting in brick. Certain pyramids are made of sun-baked brick with a facing of limestone, such as that of Knezer, User-Ka-Ra, mentioned earlier. Inversely, unfired brick is found surrounding a core made of stones, as in the pyramid of Stafiro at Medium. The pre-dynasty temple of Medamon, consecrated to Gemini, is made of 2 mounds of unfired brick surrounded by walls and headed by a double pylon, all built in the same material coated with lime wash. Bricks play an important symbolic role in the ritual of temple foundation, which obeyed very ancient specifications. All the plans always refer to a divine book. Thus, the temple of Ephur was rebuilt under the Ptolemaics according to the book of foundation, compared by Imhotep, son of Thoth. That is the 3rd dynasty. A book descended from heaven to the north of Memphis. The temple of Derder followed a plan recorded in ancient writings dating from the companions of Horus, and hence a allusion to prehistory. Further, Queen Hatshepsut says that in the execution of her obelisk, she made no more that was not directly dictated by her father, Ammon. So I'm going to show you that out of the book here. See if I can get that there closer. This is figure 14, talking about the moles being on the first brick 4 times Carnell 18th dynasty. The king, that is, the inspired one, consecrated and crowned, having abstract himself from his private thoughts, transmits the divine will to men through the phases of the empire's genesis. Therefore, the king, assisted by the Neters, is represented at all the ceremonies of a temple founding, the essential scenes of which are as follows. The king and Sisal, mistress of the divine books, each tap a mallet upon a stake which they are driving into the ground. The scene, known as stretching the cord, quote, consists in determining the orientation of the temple according to the circumpolar stars at a specific date of the year. It is also said that Thrall is there with his books, that Claude Tacklin measures the ground, that Neat utters the protective formulas, and that Sakil lays her hand upon those works destined for eternity. Then the king plows a furrow which the hoe four not tombs, times. He scatters the contents of a bushel basket, shapes the first brick, uniting earth and water 4 times for the 4 corners of the temple. And after having circled the temple with incense, the king gives the house to its master. The construction of the temple takes place after a very scrupulous selection of materials according to the symbolic intentions, and it is also according to the king's command, with the assistance of the kneaders, that the quarry is chosen from which the stone is to be extracted. So basically what they did is they made sure all this was planned out. They had already had a plan to build all this, and they knew where they were going to get it from. It wasn't just sort of put together. This was already a master plan and eventually laid out and done this way. As though they knew it would take time to do this, but they also wanted to make sure they got it right. And obviously, those that did this work also knew of these things too. The choice of the veins running through the stone or faultless masses for blocks, which are often enormous and, as with alabaster, extremely fragile, certainly implies a profound knowledge of the life of rock. The stones are never taken by attacking the mountain from without, but only in interior masses which have never undergone erosion, and immense caverns hollowed in the mountains by pharaonic quarrymen can still be seen today. To this effect, here are several words carved on the rocks of Walla Hamanat, which are rich in gold under Ramses IV, relating to the prospecting of quarries in the mountains of Bethlehem. There it is said of the king, quote, excellent in wisdom like thought. He, the king, perceived the words of the house of sacred writings in order to visit the quarries, then in obedience to the Neter's desire. He commanded the scribe of sacred writings and the prophet of the house of Mem, of Coptos, Coptos, to search Bethlehem mountains for the material destined for the great and marvelous monuments of the place of truth. This is the instance of royal theocracy, that is, theocratic act. Next, a large expedition leaves for the mountain, led by the first prophet of Ammon, and including a chief artisan, 3 overseers, quarrymen, stone cutters, draftsmen, and more than 8,000 men mobilized for these undertakings. I'm kind of curious where he gets the number 8,000 from. Kind of curious. I don't think it shows anything here about it. So far, nothing I see. The progressive drought that transformed the great forests of North Africa into steppes and then into immense deserts during the Quaternary wipe out all traces of life, plant as well as animal, except in the area surrounding the rare waterholes. Thus, almost nothing is known about the Paleolithic period apart from several rock stations found between the first and second cataracts. The petroglyphs representing long processions of elephants allow us to conclude that the population which carved these images were contemporaneous with the dense forest necessary to the life of these animals, a period estimated to date back about 20,000 years. There is the figuration of an ostrich, a giraffe, and a gazelle are the most recent and would correspond to the Magnum culture of Europe between 9,000 and 14,000 years ago. The most important Neolithic sites are Miramade, Menai Salomon, the Farrakhan, that is Faym, in the north, and Tassa in the south. It has a bracket here saying polystone and no copper objects. excavations there provide the basis for concluding that these places were occupied by hunters and farming people, manifesting very advanced craftsmanship in textiles, ivory ornaments, and innumerable tools worked in flint and the hardest stones. The burial rituals appear to differ somewhat in the north and south, as Merrimack Bene Salam. The bodies were lying in fetal positions on the north side with the head to the south, the face turned eastward, while at the Tassa, persons in the same position had the head towards the south but facing west, a burial mode encountered with the same orientation during the periods that follow in Upper Egypt and Lower Nubia. This involves a similar related to the land of Lower Egypt, that is Mermik and Bendik and Salam, and that of Upper Egypt, that is in Tassa, Bantan, and El Amara, etc., and not to people of different cults. The most important objects discovered, that is, at these sites are basalt, that is, basalt bases, indicate of a drilling technique that made possible the boring of the hardest stones and cosmetic plates, still containing traces of red orchard and malachite that reveal the use of makeup, which is found throughout the entire historical period. Wheat, barley, buckwheat, and flax were cultivated. The barley grains found in the silos of the Pharaoh pose an interesting problem. In order to have attained a variety of barley identical to that now cultivated in Egypt, the wild barley from which it is derived would have to have been cultivated for a very long time, so that the origin of agriculture would be much anterior to the Neolithic period of the Pharaohs, Faym. These grains were submitted to radiocarbon testing, which showed them to date from 4200 to 4600 BC. So we're talking about, over 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. Hence, the origins of agriculture in Egypt must certainly be much anterior to this date. The discovery of elephant bones in Farim again poses the problem regarding the date of the animal disappearance from North Africa. 3 successive civilizations are classified in pre-Diadochitic or Chalcolithic period in which copper objects appear. The Badaran and the Animatran remain, of which are encountered only in the south of Upper Egypt, directly succeeding the Tasin, T-A-S-I-A-N. The Gerzin, originally in the Phaeton, which succeeded the 2 previous civilizations of Upper Egypt, but according to several indications would have been contemporaneous in other parts of Egypt. The Badarans, determined by radiocarbon dating as having existed from about 3,800 to 4,100 years before our era, were very refined. Not only was their pottery the most beautiful and well made of the prehistoric period, but the numerous ivory ornaments, that is, the combs carved with birds' heads, or rings, bracelets, minute working figurines, all testified to their taste for adornment. They used makeup which was kept in ivory bases or horns, and which they scooped out with spoons also made of ivory. It's interesting they would put that in the horns, their makeup for women. I would never even thought they would even use makeup at that time. Interesting. One of their tombs alone contains some 5,000 to 6,000 beads of enameled steatite, the first known example of glass paste, P-A-S-T-E, imitating turquoise almost to perfection. This lapis lazuli paste, capable of scratching glass, is very siliceous and requires very high temperatures for its manufacture. These beads, similar to those of the historical period, were used to make necklaces, bracelets, and girdles. Also dating back to this period is the first endless screws. The Archimedes screw, carved in ivory. One cannot but wonder how, as well as straight or curved needles containing eyes, and the first known example of casting of and of hammering copper. The Amarantans brought a new variety to the technique of enameling by applying it upon a core such as a jewel in the shape of a bird made from this material. The hard stone cosmetic plaques take animal shapes, that is the hippopotamus, the antelope, the turtle, etc., among which Hathor symbol is noticed. Needles, pins, and other small copper tools are numerous, and the first objects in gold and silver, that is bees and vase lids, are found in these sites, dated by radiocarbon to about 3,700 to 3,950 years before our era. The statuary provides numerous examples of figurines, more or less stylized or realistic, and several instances of stereopyrus, that is a fat buttocks. Figures raise the question of race. The subject of these two civilizations are all Dotla Chifal, that is long-headed, and their hair is brown or black, braided or wavy. Curly hair is an exception. But while the Batarans have a large nose and are beardless, the Amarantans, with their aquilined nose, appear to have a short, pointed beard, and one of the elements of their dress seem to have been the Libyan sheik, with a long cloak and sandals. These type of men, the one hairless and the other one shaggy, recall the old Hindu tradition that speaks the former as a people originating from Lemuria. It's a continent that is submerged with the exception of certain islands, that is Madagascar or in Indonesia and Ceylon, which is, I think Ceylon is, it's not India. I don't think, no, it's not India, but it's an island off of India, I think it is. Ceylon. I might be wrong about that. I'm just kind of thinking in my top of my head. Who was reputed to have been beardless, that is, sexually still in a phase of determination, that is the third race, while the Atlanteans, that is the fourth race, were sexual determined and the men were bearded. According to this view, traces of Lemurians would remain on the eastern coast of Africa, while populations of the western region would hark back to the Atlanteans. The Gerson, Gerzean civilization encountered in the Phaleum in the south of Upper Egypt along the Red Sea and in Lower Nubia, aside from silver innovations, is very much like its antecedents. The flint tools attain a perfection that will never be surpassed, that is, in Egypt or elsewhere. Besides the admirable knives, which are sometimes more than 40 centimeters in length, it is sufficient to mention several very thin and carefully polished flint rings, presenting a technical problem of great interest because any percussion work would inevitably have shattered them. The first example of cast copper is found, and the first specimens of lead and ironwork, such as a falcon formed with a thin leaf of lead applied to a wooden core. Gold and silver objects are plentiful and artistically decorated, as, for example, the handle of a flint knife made of two sheets of gold stitched together by a gold thread, with which one side bearing the image of two intertwined serpents, similar to the caduceus. The famous ivory knife handle from Gabetia el Iraq is an example of great sculptural skill. Depicted on one side is a combat between what are probably Libyan personas, on the other a Mesopotamian, framed by two lines. The proportions of the figures are perfect and could not be considered as primitive art. It is useless to seek a Mesopotamian origin for this piece, who symbolically imposes itself because Egypt is the very knife which separates the east, that is Mesopotamia, from the west, Libya. During the epoch of Seti I, furthermore, the canal marking the Egypto and Asiatic frontier as Zalu was called the water of the cutting. The symbolism of a great many objects is clearly manifest by amulets in the shape of lions, jackals, falcons, even flies, frogs, bulls, crocodiles, etc., such as the Egyptian continued to wear throughout the entire historical period. I'm going to show you that here, this picture. See if I can get that up here. Okay, right there. So this is figure 15, stating that the boat carrying an elephant, symbol of the city of the first nome of Upper Egypt. The red painting on white bowl done before firing. You can tell it's very meticulous work. It's not something you just sort of put up and this is it. You can tell it's very, took time and effort to do this type of thing. Gifted. Among the many games are marbles, as well as the prototype of pharaonic chess, which makes use of the hieroglyphic sign men, meaning foundation. Lastly, Jersine pottery made from quarry clay is strongly characterized by its red on white figures, which are painted before firing. The most common motifs are of boats propelled by oarsmen and surmounted with two cabins, one of which is fitted with a pole decorated with pendants and emblems bearing the symbols of the pharaonic names, or gnomes, I should say. The Vulcanian, for example, symbol of the seventh nome of Upper Egypt, and the elephant designating the name of the Elephantine. The elephant presence, that is, on these boats, and the continuality of his symbol to designate the metropolis of the first nome of Upper Egypt. Brings in mind the epoch when the elephant lived in that country, within the country. Indeed, either the symbol was imported by people coming from the south, that is an assumption which makes little sense, or else the original naming of epophines after the animal goes back to a remote epoch when Aswan was not yet the arid desert of today. The forests have already disappeared by the beginning of the historical epoch. Thus, a tradition must have been transmuted regarding the existence of an entirely different kind of life in this area. This would serve to prove either that a race of men lived there since the time of the forest, or that this was transmitted by legend. In any case, the fact remains that men coexisted with elephants in this region as a period dating back, according to Dunbar, beyond 20,000 years. The origin of the Garcenes is very much debated. Ethnologically, the fact of the fatalism excludes the possibility of Mesopotamia origins, knowing that the mountain people of these countries are specifically rock of Safadi. Nevertheless, an indisputable artistic influence on certain details evokes the idea that several elements originating in Mesopotamia penetrated through Wada Mamat, that is towards Copius, Coptus, the main center of prehistorical sites. On the other hand, the majority of Amarantans, artisans, artistic remains clearly relative to the remaking of the latter objects found in all of West Africa on the basis of certain fat buttocks figurines. It is not only out of the question that a so-called negroid element, such as a encounter in Malti or Menton and in Africa, was at that time mingling with the natives who were peopling part of North Africa as well as in the Nile Valley, and of which the Bushmen are the last representatives. Ethnology studies have indeed revealed four racial types composing the pre-dynasty population of Cro-Magnon type, a Negroid type such as the famous specimen of Menton, a Mediterranean type corresponding in the contemporary white race, and lastly a mixed type with rare exceptions. These are no blacks, properly so called, The specimens from the beginning of the dynasty period marked a distinct augmentation of Mediterranean elements to the detriment of the Negroids. Are we dealing here, according to the tradition, with the conquest or reconquest by the Chemists of the territory then occupied by mixed populations who took refuge on the banks of the Nile? The term Shemsu Hor, incorrectly translated as companions of Horus, literally means followers of Horus in the precise scene of those who follow the path of Horus, that is, the Horian way, also called the solar way or paths of Ra. This epithet applies to superior beings who produced a race of pharaohs, as opposed to the majority of people who follow the common way, the way of Osiris. These followers of Horus bear with them a knowledge of divine origin, and unify the country with it. One fact is certain: the mode of burial in fetal position, characteristic of the entire prehistorical period, that is, in the pre-Cessacean cycle of Gemini, did not disappear immediately, and under the first dynasty, near a tomb of archaic character, a royal functionary was found buried in an elongated position. Certain instances of burial in fetal positions, as well as objects called pre-dynasty, have been found in ancient empire tombs. These facts seem to indicate that it is rather reckless to classify systematically all Badarans, Amorites, and Gerasenes ancestral sites as pre-dynasty. The customs and mores of these populations, as well as numerous objects, are indeed very different in uses and style from those of the historical epoch. But it is not impossible that the peoples dominated by the Shemites Hor preserved their customs and beliefs during a relatively long period of time before totally adapting to the religious directives of the sovereigns who brought them a sacred science. However imprecise the radiocarbon dates, most often posterior to the true dates, they make it possible to ascertain that the coexistence of so-called pre-dynasty populations with those of the beginning of the historical pharaonic empire. The Gerasenes remain testified to the existence at epoch of a population long in possession of agricultural knowledge and a craftsmanship of incontestable perfection, but offering no evidence of a writing system. Apart from a few pottery signs, in the first dynasty tombs, on the other hand, there is the sudden appearance of a complete writing and tokens of a high science. The next section is called the First Dynasties. Until the great discoveries made in 1954 at Helum and at Saqqara, and grandiose royal tombs from the first dynasties, it was still possible to. I'm going to show you some pictures here of this. So this is what they call this figure 16, so-called prehistoric palæ found at Hierakonpolis, one fragment of which is in the Louvre and two others in the British Museum. Above, from right to left, the emblems of Horus are shown. The persons wear the ritual tail, a characteristic of the pharaoh. Back to the thing here. Speak of the beginning of historical Egypt in terms of a primitive architecture and sun-dried bricks, comprising only a few rare stone pavings. But even if these tombs of kings and private personages have all suffered considerable plundering, you see, they reveal that since the first dynasty, the nobility had stone tombs, that is, The burial chambers were made of huge blocks of white limestone, painstakingly fitted together, and the superstructure of unfired bricks formed step walls, carefully coated with white plaster. Walking staffs, fans, chairs, beds, and chests were of common uses. The legs of the bedstands were admirably fashioned out of the ebony or ivory in the shape of a bull hooves. The linen garments show surprising regularity in weaving, comparably to those made by modern machine, and incredibly fineness of thread. Quote, "It is difficult to believe that it was spun with a simple spindle. To tell the truth, it seems that spinning is another of the mysteries of the ancient Egyptians, and the mind still gropes in vain to find its solution." The second dynasty testifies, moreover, that these textiles were dyed in red, green, blue, and white. The result of this excavation showed that the Egyptian civilization of the Archaic period was much more advanced than previously supposed. The discovery of Saqqara of immense tombs more than 50 to 80 meters long, dating from the first dynasty, and the names of kings also found in the small structures at Abydos. That's Abydos, again raises questions that have been considered as settled. Saqqara can now be considered the true Neocorpus, and the rudimentary tombs at Abydos, simple cenotaphs. Although burned and plundered, these tombs still yield a great many clay stoppers sealed in the name of each king, as well as ivory plaques used as labels on the wine jars. One of the most amazing details of the tomb of Uadidja, that is the third king of the first dynasty, spelled Uadji, is a ledge surrounding the entire superstructure on which was placed an arrangement of clay bull heads fitted with real horns. The interior of the superstructure of another tomb formed a vast recessed chamber entirely covered with painted frescoes, the most ancient ever found, but given the fact that no bodies of any first dynasty kings have ever been discovered, either at Abydos or at Saqqara. The problem of their final resting place remains unsolved. Earlier discoveries at Hierakonpolis, the former capital of the south, and at Abydos, the Thinite capital, had already revealed the existence of cities and fortresses constructed of unfired brick on the edges of the Libyan desert. Not far from Ballas, Ballas, a great number of ovens still containing grains of wheat and roasted barley revealed that the use of beer was already known. These ovens are meant for the malting of grain used to make a light beer. The enamel industry that was enriched by several colors, the Horus name of King Aha, the first king of the first dynasty, in brown enamel is inlaid in the blue enamel covering the entire surface of a round base. Rock crystal was used not only for arrowheads, but also for vases, the fabrication of which raises a problem yet unsolved. Even if the exterior polish can be explained, the howling of pot-bellied, rock crystal bases, several examples which were discovered at Saqqara, remain incomprehensible. Likewise, the procedure involved in the making of the extremely thin and perfectly spherical crystal vase found by a gentleman named Zaki Saad at Helum, Heluan. Perfection was attained in copper working and encountered in a vast variety of objects, such as the pitcher with the tubular spout in the hammered copper, covered with thin silver leaf. As for jewelry, we cite only the bracelet of King Djer, made of 27 elements, each having the shape of a palace facade crowned by a falcon. 13 gold parts poured molten into a mold and then chiseled and burnished, alternate with 14 turquoise elements. It must be borne in mind that these few examples of objects testifying to a very high civilization are but poor vestiges found in tombs, which had been plundered over and over again during several millennia. The hieroglyphic, writings in perfected and completed in the tomb of an official of King Djer, or King Serpent, fourth king of the first dynasty. Two scribes' palays were discovered with their cups bearing traces of red and black ink. Also dating from the same king is a fragment of accounts. The tomb of Hermaka, great visitor of King Din, that is the fifth king of the first dynasty, yielded a cylindrical wooden case completely covered with inlet aromatic woods and containing a roll of black papyrus. Wow. This same tomb also contained a large number of discs in stone, mosaic of surprising beautiful craftsmanship, which are believed to have been used as spinning tops. According to tradition, King Djer, that is the third king of the first dynasty, composed works on anatomy and built temples and palaces. We're reminded here of the famous surgical papyrus, whose archaic style confirms its very ancient origin. It's considered to go back to Intihopete, who personifies the great sage of the third dynasty. This document, which reveals a profound knowledge of the human body as a result of long observation, was possibly already very old by the third dynasty. We find gestures proving the existence of the foundation ritual as far back as King Scorpio in the prehistoric age. Details concerning the ritual revealed by the voted maces, the Narmer Palais, and the Palamo stone suffice to confirm that of the first kings of the first dynasty, the fundamental bases, BASES, of cult and royal ritual, the organization of the territory, science, and arts were already in full force. Examples of this are the ceremony of the Sed festival, which serves as proof of a perfect knowledge of sacred science, the procession around the wall, the procession of the bull, Apis, APIS, all of which remain a tradition throughout the entire historical period. On the ivory tablet belonging to King Din, the sign of the year enclosed two of these ceremonies, indicating the existence of a perfectly constituted calendar at this epoch. It is due to this calendar, already in use before the third millennia, that the annuals of the first kings can be composed by the fifth dynasty, year by year, with references to months and days. For one of the first dynasty kings, the Palamo stone relates the celebration of the festival of Sarkarius and the Dajiro festival pertaining to the cult of Osiris, a sojourn in the temple of Sais consecrated to Neat, N-E-I-T, H in Lower Egypt, and then at Heracropolis at the capital of the south, as well as the first known census of cattle, goods, and subjects. Again, we remark the existence of vineyards whose most famous vineyards were duly noted under each king. That is the first dynasty. It just gives a list of the first kings here and which ones are. Since the tombs contain sealed jars bearing these names, it is very likely that they were carefully selected wines which were consecrated to the temple's cult. And I'll show you that. The artwork looks like on them. It's amazing artwork. That is unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable artwork. The king wears the white crown of the south and the gesture of ritual masculine of the prisoners with the white mace bed. In conclusion, it must be said that it is impossible today to establish an exact chronological of the dynasties. It is impossible to clarify historically the origin of pharaonic sovereignties. To the contrary, it is certain that from the beginning of the so-called historical period with the first known pharaohs, there existed a complete writing, a carefully established calendar, a social order, a census, a perfectly ordered myth and cult, all things that obviously testify to a long civilized epoch preceding the historical period. On the other hand, no monumental document allows us to connect the state of affairs to a prehistoric period during which a cataclysm seems to have occurred. An epoch of such destruction between the ending and the beginning of a time can only be explained in the light of similar crisis. The existence of precisely such a period is observed at the end of the predecession epoch of Taurus, Taurus, the 8th of the 10th dynasties, as well as at the end of the epoch of Aries at the moment of passage into the Christian era. And again, we see the beginning of an identical crisis during the present epoch of passage from Pisces to Aquarius. The same symptoms characterize them, a democratization that casts into oblivion the achievements from the time of the kings and repudiates the religious metaphysics. The social disorder, moreover, is often accompanied by climatological and telger disturbances. Rationally, it is not comprehensible how the sole fact of the Vernon point aiming at its constellation, that is a region of the starry heavens, can produce such phenomena by passing into a new sector. The fact nevertheless remains and can be verified. We must imagine a similar grave crisis for the same reason during the passage of the vertical point from Gemini to Taurus, a moment that is situated towards the year 4200 BC. The first dynasty known as historical is very probable situated about 700 years later during the second decade of Taurus, about 3500 BC, starting with this first dynasty. We observed a established cult dedicated to the principle of the bull, the cult previously dedicated to the twins, that is the Gemini, as evidenced by the mounds on the virgin soil of Madamun, as well as the custom of burial in the fetal position, ceased from that time on. In parallel with this hypothesis, we observe a similar sudden and glorious renaissance at the beginning of Hamon's cult of the ram at the time of Sesostris III towards 1900 BC, about 3 centuries after the transition from Taurus to Aries. Similar to the definite establishment of Christianity is in the year 325 AD under Constantine with the proclamation of Christianity as the state religion and the closing of the temples of Egypt at the time of the Council of Nicaea. And I want to show you another craft work here also before I continue to read. Which again looks like a giant vase. Let's see. Okay. And the artwork there. So this was the Narmer, Narmer Palais, the king wearing the red crown of the north is preceded by the scribe and 4 emblematic banners. That is the state religion and the closing of the temples of Egypt, which I just read. Establishing the Council of Nicaea, establishing the separation of Roman Catholicism from Orthodox Catholicism after long and difficult discussions on the interpretation of the Gospels. Mention must also be made of the serious disturbance which took place in Egypt at the end of the Ptolemy's, Ptolemies, before the passage of the Vernon point. Adopting this principle distinctly astrologically in character would certainly illuminate all that disturbs historians. about the beginning and upheavals of this great land of Egypt so mysteriously to our rationalist mentality. While historical facts confirm these strange religious and social movements, they do not explain the relation that could exist between these phenomena and the sole fact of transition of the variant point from one celestial region signed by a group of constellations to another. We lack the knowledge of zodiac influence upon the vital phenomenon, although it seems that such a science must have existed. Indeed, for what reason or through what reasoning would this zodiac have been established, ascribing a planetary, elementary, and a psychological character to each sign? And that's important. Most people are caught up in what we call psychology, but astrology in the past was psychology. I just want to make that clear, as me and Phil have talked about that. And that's true. This is very true. In the modern phase, basically in the last 200 years or so to speak, the psychology of such and such of the character. But again, astrological signs, again, would dealt with what we call the psyche, you see. This is certainly not just a random result, nor is it a result of systematization or vain speculation. It is true that men of wisdom have affirmed the proved existence of a systematic arrangement of the zodiac on the basis of sacred science. This zodiac has existed at all times. It was known in China, India, Chaldea, Egypt, and probably among the Mayans, and even in our Middle Ages as figurations of zodiac signs on the portions of medieval cathedrals testify to that. So that's the conclusion of chapter 4 tonight. Just wanted to deal with this particular area. Got started with it and then couldn't finish it the other night, and I wanted to get back to that. The next chapter will be called Symbology and Symbol, and we'll get into that another time. But this is, again, like I say, this is by Rene Schwaller's work. And the reason why I'm reading it simply is that part of it simply is by Phil stating it simply was well worth reading this information. And this tends to be what I call something that probably Phil likes when I'm reading it, because Phil thinks it's great work. Yes, I agree. But I'm more in depth with what I call the works by Alvin Boyd Kuhn, because it deals with philosophy. And because I enjoy reading about philosophy. So, but this is about halfway through the book here. This is a massive book by him also. But thank you for being here. Appreciate you coming along and visiting. And I hope that you enjoyed the information I've shared tonight. And we will hopefully continue another time. And thank you, and you take care. Again, this is called the Sacred Science, a Continuation of Chronological of Egypt by Rene Schwaller de Lubicz. So have a good night, and you take care.